Gümrüklerle bağlantılılık, özellikle Kore'de düzeltilen ithalat vergi faturası sigortası ve sonradan kontrol süreçleri konusunda yasal yetkilendirme başlıklı sunumunda gümrükler için önemli bir alan olan vergi ve sonradan kontrol konularında bizleri ulusal uygulamalar hakkında ilgilendirecekler. Kendilerine şimdiden teşekkür ediyorum. Buyurun soru size.
Well, as the first person to present our last session for today's afternoon, I would like to say my sincere thanks to everybody who came to listen and take interest in my study, and also for the WCO, the Turkish Customs and Korea Customs Service, who provided such a very rare and really fruitful opportunity to take part in this PICARD conference. Today's my title contribution looks very complicated, but it's really simple. It only just means that my idea to propose state representation by private or external legal experts in Korea Customs Services, customs audits, or levying import VATs on taxpayers. And this study will have many different features from our previous sessions in like data analysis or information intelligence, because this study is not constructed on the past experiences or past information of customs administration, but rather it is a kind of a new and very abstract idea for what future customs administration could benefit from having representation or co-work with the private sector, such as law firms or certified customs consultants. Because I'm very aware that we are all short of time, and we've already spent a lot of time in our previous morning and afternoon sessions, I'll jump right to the conclusion part of my presentation and emphasize my key points of my ideas and the grounds which I want to make. And then come back to any missing parts in the main part. So I'll go right to the end of my PT now. So the parts which I just skipped through all the way down, like pages, like 10 or 12 pages, are the legal history or background information of why I believe state representation by external experts could be helpful in levying import VATs or conducting customs audits on Korean taxpayers. And my first idea was to propose that external authorization or external outer control by legal experts when Korea Customs Service goes through a procedure under the Korean VAT law, whether to impose import VAT on taxpayers or allow them a deduction or recovery of the VAT. Explaining the details or technical details on what the Korean VAT law does in this new process will be too complicated, but to just make a long explanation short, this means that before Korea Customs Service determines whether to grant recovery of VAT to taxpayers or to disallow such benefit to taxpayers and just decided to collect import VATs, it could be a prudent idea to go through another legal layer, another legal authorization layer from an outside independent legal control, which would mean that in two meanings. From a customs administration side, it will mean that a legal empowerment and another extra layer to strengthen their legal authority when making a decision, no matter whether it's in favor or against the taxpayer. So if, for instance, if Korea Customs goes through, after consulting and going through an external legal expert's process and decides to collect import VAT from taxpayers, it will mean that it has a better chance and a stronger authority in defending its position of collecting taxes from the taxpayer. On the other hand, if the Korea Customs Service decides to grant a VAT deduction or VAT recovery to taxpayers and grant them benefits, after going through the external experts verification, then the customs services such decision would be have a better legal standing, legal backing. So, and the part at the lower part is an informal survey for potential or Korean taxpayers on whether they think that an external legal experts consultation from Korea Customs side before making a decision whether to collect import VAT or a grant deduction might be wise. And well, as you can see in the rough picture, a relative majority of Korean taxpayers support the idea of having another legal control for the import VAT regime. My second idea for proposing state representation by external legal experts is for the customs administration's customs audit. So traditionally, the Korea Customs Service's main way of investigating the taxpayers and collecting import duties is by conducting a customs audit. And I believe that because the customs audit often leads to collection of taxes and legal disputes between the taxpayer and Korea Customs, having an external legal representation for the states, for the Korea Customs side, would both strengthen the Korea Customs position to defend itself and also to improve the taxpayers' credibility or trust for the customs audit result, whether it means to collect taxes or not. And before just wrapping up, I'll just go back all the way to the front part and make some few explanations on the basic stories of why I suddenly wanted to propose such two ideas. And in the middle of the presentation, I would like to say, well, apologize for going in such a hurry and rushing through the conclusions because, well, I thought I'm kind of running out of time, so. I'll just go through only the basics and not too much detail. So this statistics for 5 years is to emphasize that other taxes, import VATs and other taxes other than customs duty take up a very, very important portion for Korea Customs Services kind of tax collection. And I'll just bring And the reason for introducing the invoice method here is because for Korean taxpayers to receive a deduction or effectively recovery of their VAT, they need to have a tax invoice issued by the tax authority. For import products or import VATs, they need to receive an import tax invoice from the head of the customs office if they want to receive import VAT deduction or benefits. And this is a short overview of a general overview of what happens and what are the major topics in Korea Customs post-audit system. I'll skip this and. Prior to the Korea's VAT Act amendment mentioned here in 2013, most Korean importers, even when they were investigated in a customs audit and had import VAT levied by customs office, they could receive import VAT deduction and effectively offset that VAT burden to zero by receiving a special kind of tax invoice called the corrected import tax invoice. It's the technical jargon, so I'll keep to the expression corrected import tax invoice. So in easy words, to clarify, if importers were levied extra VAT, but at the same time received this corrected import tax invoice, they could eventually get back what VAT they paid. So, which means that in reality, they won't have much VAT burden on them. However, the law change in 2013 July narrowed down the causes for Korean taxpayers to receive this so-called corrected import tax invoice only in cases when they proved to have no fault or no liability to be blamed for whatever VATs or missing taxes they didn't pay. And because of the VAT Act suddenly narrowed down the scope or decreased the Korean taxpayers' possibility of receiving VAT recovery, there was a sharp increase in customs litigations and less cooperative behavior by Korean taxpayers when they were audited by customs offices. And also, I'll skip the procedure because I mostly explained the general stuff. And as can be seen in the slide, the amount of customs audits and customs disputes, such as lawsuits and tax tribunal appeals and other customs legal disputes between the customs service and taxpayers, increased around after the time when the Korean VAT law restricted the chances for receiving this corrected import tax invoice. And after much of much increase in the disputes and controversy on whether restricting the taxpayers' rights or benefits to receive these corrected import tax invoice is proper, the recent Korean VAT Act was amended in 2018, so that now the new law allows, in substance, taxpayers to receive the corrected import tax invoice even when the importer has slight or little amount of negligence. This means that if somebody receives a customs audit and is levied extra VAT tax on them, and has fault, has some kind of blame for not reporting the proper amount of tax, but that amount of blame is very little or low, then they will still be allowed a VAT deduction. And the second part is the technical details that the taxpayer has a formal procedure now in place to request to the customs office to issue such kind of corrected import tax invoice when it believes itself to have no or very little amount of fault. This recent legislation was intended to protect the taxpayer's right and facilitate customs administration and decrease unnecessary disputes. However, my explanation, well, in theory sounds like it's just all good and great for the taxpayers, but it has many kind of practical shortcomings so far. And first, because it was enacted so recently, there are no clear and detailed explanations by the lawmakers or the court cases on which cases are slight negligence by the importer. As most of you have already experienced during today's and yesterday's PICARD conference, many of the customs and modern customs administration, important decisions are made based on detailed scientific data analysis. So there are in many cases, there are many scientific and objective data which back up the decisions made by the customs authority to do taxation or not, to impose penalties or grant benefits. However, the new Korean VAT law allows benefits to taxpayers when there's a very abstract and theoretical sounding term, such as when he or she has slight negligence. I mean, this is too much open to interpretation, and it still means that if a taxpayer is like assessed customs duty by an audit and thinks that he or she has only a slight amount of fault, but the customs office disagrees, then there's no other method but to litigate and go to court. And on the other hand, it's not easy for Korea Customs Service to easily let off the taxpayers or grant them benefits without having clear and objective criteria, because giving them too much concessions without clear objective evidence would mean to lead to other controversies. So these are excerpts for the recent Korean law, and the upper part is just a copy of the Korean VAT law, meaning that when the importer has slight negligence, then he or she can still receive the corrected import tax invoice plus the VAT deduction benefit. And the lower part is the Customs Service's 2018's practical guidance on how to interpret this law and when to grant the correct import tax invoice, when to not grant it. As you can see, the practical guidance by Korea Customs Service is much more detailed and much better compared to the law itself, but still lacks concrete evidence enough to be applied to all cases in general. In reality, this guidance can only be applied case by case. So it will still leave room for much discussions, debates, or in some cases, disputes. So after going through all the mainstreams of the background legal histories and what kind of legal theories are in issue in the Korean VAT regime, I come back to my two suggestions which I proposed at the beginning of my speech. So my first idea that we need external legal control in deciding whether to grant corrected import tax invoice benefit to importers or not. I believe that introducing an external control layer before Korea Customs makes its final decision whether to penalize the importer by not giving them the corrected import tax invoice or to grant them benefits by allowing them the corrected import tax invoice. Such kind of extra legal layer by independent outsiders would both improve credibility and strength for the customs administration. This kind of control is not meant only to it's not meant to give benefits or prejudice to taxpayers one-sidedly from the private sector. This could benefit both sides of both customs office and the taxpayers, because having an objective, independent mediator in the middle of this procedure, whether to give VAT back to the taxpayers or not, and such kind of outside mediator not being on the side of either the customs officers or the private taxpayers would prove much objectiveness and clairvoyance in predictability in making this important decision. And my second suggestion, second idea that the legal experts representing the state, representing the Korea Customs in customs audit, was also kind of made as a continuation of my first idea. Because in many cases recently, due to the utilization of FTAs and free trade agreements and regional agreements, many import items in Korea have 0% or very low tariff rates, which means that import VAT is now relatively much more important than the traditional tariff or customs duties. So as a result of such a decision whether to grant import VAT benefits to taxpayers or not, are mostly made as a result at the final part of the customs audit. Having representation by lawyers or customs experts on the side of the customs office would prove both better chances of successfully defending the state's interest and also improving the taxpayers' compliance, voluntary compliance, by making the case much more legally objective and much more credible. My ideas for external private experts like lawyers or customs experts representing the country or the customs service is not an unprecedented or not an absurd idea, because as a comparative matter, in the current Korean legal system has a special law which entitles the customs service, the national tax service, and any other Korean government agencies to appoint external lawyers or law firms to represent and defend the state's interest when it comes to lawsuits. What I'm proposing is that to extend such kind of way of representation to customs audits before the audits results go wrong and reach the court. So this is a kind of a preventative or preliminary measure which could be made before lawsuits happen. And when the customs audits are still in place, and when there's still room and still possibility for the customs office and the taxpayers to reach a mutual agreement and mutual understanding. On these surveys, as I just explained, show that Korean taxpayers show a relatively positive attitude that if an external representation by experts support and defend the customs service for the audit results and tax impositions, they are relatively more willing to acquiesce and concede to the customs decision to levy taxes on them and pay the taxes rather than going to lawsuit. And once again, I believe that I originally intended to make this presentation in a very kind of orderly and in a refined manner, but because I had to hurry too much, I'm afraid that much of my explanations are too much, abbreviated and too much out of place. So, if anybody has interest in questions or interest in what kind of topic this is and what this guy wants to say, then I would like any of you who have interest or similar laws or similar regimes like in the Korea Customs Service in your member state, contact me further by questions, answers, or perhaps by email. As I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, this study is not a scientific data analysis of the past experience, but rather is a completely new attempt to make ideas, give ideas, even if it's only a very rough and abstract idea, to all PICARD member states' customs administrations. So if any of you have similar interests or similar ideas on this kind, then I would like to kindly ask for your feedback in the future. Because I've taken up too much of the time, I'd like to wrap up my presentation now here. Thank you.
Evet, Sayın Joe'ya bu son derece verimli ve organize sunumları için ve zamana, kendilerine tahsis edilen zamanı en iyi şekilde kullandıkları için teşekkür ediyoruz. Bu arada soruları oturumun sonunda alacağımızı hatırlatıp ben izninizle ikinci sunumumuza geçmek istiyorum. İkinci sunumda Endonezya'dan Sayın Wisnu Nuryanto, doğru telaffuz edebiliyor muyum bilmiyorum, bizlere gümrük idareleri ticaret imkanı ve genel veri koruma tüzüğü başlıklı sunumlarını gerçekleştirecekler. Ve kendisi özellikle oturum başlığımız olan bağlantılılık alanında dikkat çekilmesi gereken bir husus olan verilerin korunmasına dair bizlere bilgi verecekler. Ben sözü kendisine bırakmadan önce yakın geçmişte Endonezya'da meydana gelen üzücü deprem nedeniyle hayatını kaybeden tüm Endonezya vatandaşlarına başsağlığı diliyorum ve gerek şahsım, gerek bakanlığım, gerek Türkiye Cumhuriyeti vatandaşları ve gerekse de konferansımıza katılım sağlayan tüm katılımcılar adına geçmiş olsun ve başsağlığı dileklerimizi iletiyorum. Buyurun, söz sizde.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Wisnu Nuryanto. I'm from Indonesian Customs. Thank you for this opportunity to present our study. Okay, I would like to discuss about Customs Trade Facility and GDRP. So what's that? We'll see here. Okay. So this study is aimed to examine the impact of Customs Facility in terms of bounded zone and exempt and refund to local economy in specifically in Tangerang region. Tangerang region is an urban area near Jakarta, near capital city of Indonesia. So if you flew to Indonesia, you will land it in the airport that located in the Tangerang. So Tangerang is separated into 3 districts, which is Tangerang District, Tangerang City, and South Tangerang City. So this study is limited to that area. So if you want to know more about bounded zone, so it's kind of facility that provided to companies in the, within a zone. So the facility is only in the zone within the region. So within company, we make a zone that they comply with they impose with a facility that consists of duties and tax deferred. So the duties is deferred and tax are unpaid. I mean tax, VAT and imported tax. And same with that exempt and refund, it's kind of import facility to induce export. So this facility, the exempt and refund, is provided to exporters. So we in government, customs, provided facility to exporters. So if they import something, they will have, if they export, their import will be facilitated with deferred or uncollected duties and uncollected taxes. And this study is limited only for 5 years period from 2010 until 2014 because that's the only available and readily data we have. And finally, in the findings, as previous study, we confirm that export is an important factor that affect local growth. This is significant and has positive impact. And then we also find that export-driven import, so import that objected for export or import that directed for export is highly positive and significant also to GDRP. So I'll recall about GDRP. GDRP is a part of GDP. So if GDP is in the national context, so in the regional context, in provincial or districts, it will be GDRP. So GDRP, groups of GDRP will be a GDP. So because this study is measured the impact of custom facility to local context within Tangerang region, so we use a GDRP as a proxy of local economies. So we found the result that 1% increase in import facility will raise GDRP at 15.95%. And 1% increase in export facility will raise GDRP at 5.19%. So we conclude that government intention to stimulate export by facilitating import can be considered successful in Tangerang region. This study is built on belief that trade facility we provide is has a role as catalyst to improve or to increase the trading level, which then expected to, in the end, to increase economic growth as stimulate of economic growth. It started from our DGCE, Directorate General of Customs and Excise, to we have a first mission to facilitate trade in industry. And while we provide facilitation, we want to create competitive advantage, which then with that competitive advantage, global investor will be interested to plan their money to grow here in Indonesia. And then it will open industrialization and expand job opportunity. That's the domino effect. And then in the end, it will boost economic growth both nationally and regionally, and which are we measured here in this study. We also have another paradigm about this facilitation, that government facilitation is kind of government investment, you know, because we exempt our revenue from the imported goods. So it's kind of government investment to the companies. So because of this investment, public want to know about what is the impact of this investment by the government. So this study is to provide that measurement as a public accountability, and also we need a local support. By this information, the local government will know that our facilitation is important for their region. So we expect that the local government will support our effort to increase this investment. And all is measured on GDRP. With this belief, we raised the research question that whether export-led custom facilities, so these facilities is specifically directed to induce export. So we called it export-led customs facilities that have been being employed by our office or our region is significantly impact to its GDRP or not. We had some study before that, like Franker and Romer from AER, that trade has an effect on income, and also other studies that mostly they have an ideas that trade has an impact on or influence on income. And specifically for this study, we follow the study from Hidayat Sari and Akwaldo because it has limited literatures specifically discussed on GDRP. So this is the only study we found, and this Hidayat, Sari, and Akwaldo conclude that export and manpower significantly has positive impact on local economic growth. In this study, we employ the previous methodology that it consists of that the independent variable consists of GDRP that we will measure, and that we will measure its impact by dependent variable, which is transaction value from import and export facilities. The GDRP provided by Central Statistical Bureau, it's open for public, and the transaction value is provided from our office, and is limited for access. So the model is kind of a combination of some variables, that the dependent variable, which is GDRP, we use natural logarithm to smooth the data. And the dependent variable consists of combination of data of import and export from each type of facility. In our discussion, we use this basic equation, and we expand it into 4 types of equation. So the empirical result we have from the 4 type of equation, we divided its variables into a bonded import from exempt and refund, import facilities combination data of bonded and export, exempt and refund. So it's kind of summing the data into import facility, and export bonded and export from exempt and refund facility. And export facility is combination of export bonded and export exempt and refund. So among the 4 equation, we have these numbers. Mostly, we will discuss one by one in this equation in these slides. So this is the first combination of variables that consists of both facilities that separated into each variables, which consists of variables of import bonded, import exempt and refund, export bonded, and export if exempt and refund. So this equation or this model measures the impact of import and export companies employing both facilities, bonded and exempt and refund, on GDRP of Tangerang. The result is only import exempt and refund and export bonded that significant and positive to GDRP. And in the next equation, we employ the bonded facilities only. So the result shows that only export bonded that significant and positive to GDRP. And this is the model that combined both facilities into one number. So it's kind of merging or summing the import bonded and exempt into import facility and export of bonded and exempt and refund into export facility. It results with expected numbers that both import facility and export facility are positive and significant for both variables. This is what we use as a conclusion that 1% increase, as we see here, in import facilities will raise GDP at 15.95. And 1% increase in export facility will enhance GDRP at 5.19%. Okay. And this is the last combination that consists only of exempt and refund facilities. And we have here only export variables that significant and positive to GDRP. So from the four equation model, we conclude that import facility and export facility, combination of both facility in one number, has a positive and significant impact to local economies. So we conclude that trade facilities provided by custom has positive and significant impact to local economies, to Tangerang region. And all of export variables, as we've seen before, here, all of export variables are significant at 1% level, except for exempt and refund that's significant at 5% level. So it's consistent with previous finding that export are important factor that has a positive and significant impact to local GDP or GDRP. We have some analysis to what this happened to this different kind of result from those of four equation. So this data, as long as we have the data as for 4 years, some companies are not included. Some companies that are big companies are not all of them are. The data are included or the data are available. So we have the available data we have, and this is the result. And for bonded facility, there is a fact that they can also use a local procurement, or they can buy they can procure or they can buy their materials from local, not for import. So in this equation that configures only bonded facility, import bond is not significant because of the fact that bonded facilities can procure, can buy the materials from local, not from import. So their importation is not, their local procurement is not accounted in this study. And we conclude that facility to export, to stimulate export is successful in this region. So we suggest that it could be expanded to another region or in national level. That's all from me, and I expect any feedback or any question. Thank you very much.
Evet, Sayın Nuryanto'ya da bu son derece kapsamlı ve güzel sunumlar için teşekkür ediyoruz. Eğer varsa olası sorularınız için sözü saygıdeğer dinleyicilerimize bırakıyoruz. Evet.
Thank you, dear moderator. Firstly, thank you for all the speakers with regard to their fruitful presentations. Starting from Korea, I will ask some questions to better understand your program. You usually use the terminology of import tax invoice. Is it a document issued by customs to inform the importers on how much duties should be paid, or is it a document that importers issue themselves directly to pay the VAT after an importation transaction in Korea? Secondly, by taking into consideration of the post-clearance audit mechanism's role on trade facilitation, what is the concrete suggestion of your study to improve the current post-control audit mechanisms of WCO member countries within the context of trade facilitation? And lastly, your post-control audit mechanism, is it a facility that also covers deferred controls of imported goods rather than controlling all the goods at borders, or is it a common PCA mechanism just for carrying out controlling of goods after their release from customs offices with a view to verification of compliance through examination of the traders' books or records at their premises? And I also would like to ask a question to the colleague from Indonesia. Could you please redescribe the abbreviation of GDRP? Because if I understand correctly, before this session, we thought GDRP as the General Data Protection Regulation. Therefore, after your presentation, it looks a little bit not the case. And it's very interesting and different econometric study for all of us. Therefore, could you please, in a simple way, if you redescribe the abbreviation of GDRP, it will be very useful for all of us. Thank you.
Özür diliyorum. Sorulan cevaplarına geçmeden önce ben özellikle değerli dinleyicimizin son sorusuyla ilgili olarak şu hatırlatmayı yapmak isterim. Zamanımız kısıtlı. Normal programımızın da bir hayli gerisinde kaldığımızı düşünerek söz konusu sorulan soruyla ilgili GDRP'nin tanımını yeniden yapmak yerine çok kısa bir tanımını yapmakta fayda var diye düşünüyorum. Bu hatırlatmayı yaparak öncelikle sorulma sırasına göre Koreli meslektaşımıza sözü veriyorum.
Okay, and thank you for your thoughtful and detailed questions. And I'll try to answer your three questions as concisely as possible without going into too much complications. My answers to your first question is that it is the Korea Customs Service. It is the state who issues this corrected import tax invoice. So Korean private taxpayers or importers cannot issue it by themselves. Of course, they self-declare what is the proper value, a customs duty or value of the goods. However, the import tax invoice is issued by the head of the customs office. And the customs office also has the final authority and say to reinvestigate and recorrect the originally issued invoice if they find any faults or fraudulent tax evasion attempts by the taxpayer later on. My second question, my answer to your second question about what is my concrete idea or concrete kind of aim for purpose for facilitating customs and private relations in the post-audit system is that it basically comes back to my idea of state representation, because I believe that if the state, the customs office is represented by external legal experts, it will not only mean that the customs office will be one-sidedly attacking or persecuting the taxpayer, but rather it will give a much more legally objective and balanced view between the taxpayers and customs office, which in the long run, I believe, will reduce unnecessary legal disputes in the gray area. You can think about this in this way. Up until now, in Korea and probably most other countries, the taxpayers or the private sector has the right to appoint private representatives for their tax, customs audits or litigations. But the government only has no or very limited chances or limited legal resources to deploy. So I believe that this kind of equality in the rights to representation between the state and the taxpayer will lead to a better harmony or facilitation in the post-audit regime. And third, my last answer to what is the scope of the post-audit system, I'm not sure whether I understood your question in detail, but as a simple answer, the post-audit system I introduced in my study is meant to be the general in-principle post-audit, which can target any import items within the statute of limitations, not only limited to transborder or illegal goods. So it can cover all general areas of customs administration. Oh, yeah, okay. I'll get the...
Thank you for your question. This is the same case with me when I started this study, that when I searched the previous literature on GDRP, I didn't find a correct abbreviation on GDRP. So there is some terms on GDRP. So GDRP is, for short, is kind of GDP in local context. So you know, GDP is measured the level of economy on national context, on context of country. But GDRP is measured the economic level on the level of provincial, states, or even in lower level of government like districts, or even lower than that, depends on each government. So some literatures refer it as GRDP. It's kind of vice versa of GDRP, so it's in the same terms that it's abbreviation of gross domestic regional product. So GRDP is gross regional domestic product. Or some literatures refers it as gross regional product. It's the same term that it's a short kind of GDP. I mean GDP at the lower level of government, like states or districts or regions, something like that. But thank you very much for your attention.
Evet, teşekkür ediyoruz. Buyurunuz.
Thank you. My name is Zhenya Peteva. I have a question for Korean colleague. When you said your concept is very interesting because you approach it from taxpayers' rights, and I think I need to reflect over your comments. I just I was just wondering, could you say how is the audit organized in Korea for companies and for the customs administrations? Because in many European countries, we have a third, also in the US, a third layer, so to say, where you have internal and external audit. And so much it's also is the customs administration subject to some external audit for the audit service? And what drives you to believe that state representation would solve the issue in terms of, do you believe that it's lack of transparency, lack of fairness? I would just be curious to hear more about it.
Okay, thank you for showing interest in my ideas and also for giving questions. For your first question, I'll give a brief explanation from the Korea Customs Service side of audit, because going into internal audits of private companies would be too much variable and too complicated. So, from my experience and also according to Korean laws, the Korea Customs Service conducts the post-import audit in principle. So, of course, in very special exceptions, they can inspect and audit the imported goods right away, but that's an exceptional case. So, in principle, the audits are done after the importation, as import clearance is done. And it's mainly divided into two types of audits. The first one is the regular audit, which happens roughly every 5 years because the statute of limitations, and is selected. The target companies or the target taxpayers of auditees are selected according to their average export or import volumes and their past legal compliances, so whether they had any issues against Korea Customs or any illegal activities. And also according to if they had any past audit experience, like more or less irregularly, on spot. If there is a special issue or on specific kind of industries or a specific individual company which, for instance, might be suspected of duty evasion on a high level. So these are the two main streams. And the reason why I believe that state representation could be beneficial and necessary in customs audit is not because of some kind of vague idea or because of, only because of this informal survey, but because of my past experience, both as, well, shortly in the private sector from the taxpayer side, and my past work experience with the Korea Customs Service when I was in the state side. And in many cases, as you just pointed out, really rightfully, that there's, rather than whether the customs service is answer the decision, whether their conclusion is right or wrong, often does not matter as much as whether reaching such conclusion was transparent and trustworthy from the taxpayer side. So, to avoid a misunderstanding, I'm not saying that the customs authority is doing things in an unclear or bad way. I'm not saying that. However, because the taxpayer has very limited amount of power and limited information compared to the customs office, many of the Korean taxpayers who are being audited and being levied taxes often demand and really wish for much more open information and much more public areas where the customs office shows much more detailed procedures and on what kind of job they're doing and why they're doing this to them. So I thought that state representation, if it is designed in an ideal manner, could help tackle this problem.
Evet, teşekkür ediyoruz. Başka sorusu olan? Buyurun.
Yes, thank you. I would like to thank you two presenters for their comprehensive explanation. But I have a question on the Indonesia colleague. When I found your Richard, I fully agree that the import and export facility raised the GDRP or bonded area zone. But just I want to focus on how do you classify the import facility and export facility? Because at your Richard, the import facility increase raised the about 16% of GDRP, comparing to the export is more 3 times more than export. So, but normally in the bonded area, the facilities is related to the export and import together. As you said, export-driven import is very important. So when I think your region, maybe how can you classify the import facility and export facility? Normally, I think export is the important factor to increase your regional or the domestic economic development. But when you're region, the import factor is most important factor to raise your regional economy. So how do you divide the two factors? It's just based on your study. That's my curiosity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. In our office, I work for customs office in Tangerang region. So we have population data on companies that they granted facilities. So they are the types of facilities that I discussed here is which are bonded zone facility and exempt and refund facility. So we have about 140 companies that employ bonded zone facility and about almost 100 companies that employ exempt and refund facility. So with these companies, we collect the data on their import and export. And then we separated them into each region. And then we merge the data into each region. And then we run regression on each region's GDRP. So we mainly use data from each company. So this is, we can separate it into its facility between, so we exclude all, or we exclude all general or non-facility company. So we include only companies that they granted facility or they employ this facility. So this is an exclusive data that we sure they are their import or export are employing this facility. So with this data collection, we affirm that these data are data that companies that employ facility, each facility, it's different facility, export, exempt and refund facilities, and bonded zone facilities. We can't easily define the data because we initially get the data from each company that employ those facilities. I think that's my explanation. If you have more questions, I will be glad. Thank you.
Teşekkür ediyoruz. Başka sorusu olan var mı acaba? Başka soru görünmüyor. Zaman kısıtımız var ama ben değerli tercümanlarımızın ve değerli dinleyicilerimizin izniyle moderatör şapkamı çıkarıp bir dinleyici şapkamı takarak bir soru sormak istiyorum. Özellikle Sayın Nuryanto'ya soracağım bu soruyu. Sayın Nuryanto sunumunda özellikle ithalat ve ihracat tesislerinin ya da teşviklerinin evet, sanırım sorumu baştan almam gerekiyor. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Sunumunuzda ithalat ve ihracat facility'lerinin ya da tesislerinin, teşviklerinin yerel bazdaki milli gelire olan etkilerini ele aldınız, araştırmışsınız. Ve buradan benim çıkardığım sonuç ithalat teşvikleri ya da tesislerinin gelir üzerindeki, en azından lokal düzeyde gelir üzerindeki etkilerinin ihracat tesislerinden çok daha yüksek olduğu, yaklaşık 3 kat gibi bir etki farkı olduğu yönünde. Bunu biraz daha genelleştirirsek, bölgesel değil de ulusal ya da global düzeyde bunu ele alırsak, son dönemde yaşamış olduğumuz ticaret savaşlarını, özellikle de bu ticaret savaşlarında gözlemlediğimiz çok önemli bir unsur, yıllardır liberal ticareti savunan bir takım ülkelerin korumacılığın en katı noktasında bir takım önlemler aldığını görüyoruz. Bu önlemleri yaptığınız çalışmanın sonuçlarıyla karşılaştırdığınızda bilimsel anlamda bir takım şeyleri biz yanlış mı ölçüyoruz, yoksa birileri bilimsel sonuçların aleyhine ya da bunlara rağmen bir takım siyasi mülahazalarla kararlar mı alıyorlar? Bunu nasıl değerlendiriyorsunuz?
Sorry. So you mean that why the import increase is much higher than the export level? You mean like that?
Excuse me, I would just like to turn to in English. Okay. The first part of my question is, yes, how can you explain this rate of increase or the difference between the effect of import and export on GDRP or GRDP? And the second part is that if that's the case, that import has much more effect on GDP or GDRP, why at present time some countries are imposing so high import duties on some critical products that they get used to import from all around the world?
Yeah, yes.
Yep.
Yes. It's typically our case in our country that nowadays today government impose higher import duties in some strategic product that we need. It's typical our case, but in our study we mentioned about facility, that companies that create facility. For example, like bonded zone, it's not happened to exempt and refund, because for exempt and refund, every import they use with the facility, they need to export it. In our case, like that. So, if the company that deploy in the exempt and refund facility, if they are not export the goods, they will have some penalties, like 100% sanctioned fine from its duties. But from the bonded zone facilities, they have some kind of relaxation that they can sell their products locally in domestic market instead of export it. So it's kind of relaxation for the bonded zone facilities that in addition to their export market or export product, so they can import their materials and then they process the products and they can sell the products in domestic market. So that's why in this study, in this year of period, we see that the import level is much higher than the export level, that their contribution to GDRP. So because of the fact that the bonded zone facilities company, they can sell their products domestically. Maximum is 50% by law, but for some reason they can sell domestically more than more than 50% or even more than 100% of their export sales. So we analyzed why this happened to this study. That's our analysis on the result of this study. That commodity zone can sell domestic, so its export level is not much higher than their import level in terms of GDRP.
Evet, teşekkür ediyoruz. Ben Tekrar bir kez daha değerli sunuş yapan meslektaşlarımıza hem kendim hem bütün dinleyicilerimiz adına çok teşekkür ediyorum. Oturumu kapatmadan önce birkaç küçük hatırlatmam var. Öncelikle yarınki oturumlarımız sabah 8.30'da başlayacak. Sizleri çok zorladığımızın farkındayız ama açıkçası bu zorlamayı yapmasak dünyanın sayılı güzelliklerinden olan Nemrut Dağı'na sizi götürmek ve o güzellikleri keşfetmenizi sağlama imkanına sahip olamayacaktık. O nedenle anlayışınıza sığınarak sizleri sabah 8.30'da ilk oturumlarımıza katılmak üzere toplantı salonlarımıza davet etmek istiyorum. İkinci bir hatırlatmam, yarın yine biraz önce bahsetmiş olduğum gibi öğlen yemek sonrasında sosyal programımıza başlayacağız ve sosyal programımızda da Nemrut Dağı gezimiz olacak. Daha önce bununla ilgili uyarımızı yapmıştık ama ben bir kez daha hatırlatmak isterim. Hava sıcaklığının yarın bizim orada bulunduğumuz saatlerde 0 derece ile 2 derece arasında değişmesini bekliyoruz. Dolayısıyla bu hava sıcaklığına uygun şartlarda giyinmeniz, sağlığınız ve ülkelerinize, ailelerinize sağlıklı bir şekilde, toplantının başarılı geçtiği gibi aynı zamanda sağlıklı bir şekilde dönebilmeniz için önem arz ediyor. Ben bunu bir kez daha hatırlatmak istedim. Gerek sizleri sabrınız için kutluyorum ve gerekse de tercüman arkadaşlarımızın sabrına ve anlayışına sığınıyorum. Bu duygu ve düşüncelerle hepinize iyi akşamlar diliyorum. Malatya'dan mümkün olan en maksimum ölçüde bu akşam yararlanmayı size şiddetle salık veriyorum. Hepinize iyi akşamlar diliyorum.